a lot of the Hebrews call on for information, which is good. You know, that's powerful right there. And of course, I'm sitting in with another strong soldier. Some people say divine prospect is in over his head. They said they would have rather seen.
Only says that.
No, trust me. They said they would have rather seen you first spar with Iman Bashir before you jump up to the
No disrespect, but listen, I love Iman Bashir, but he ready for divine.
Oh no,
You're not ready.
That's real talk.
Okay, I love you.
Come on over here,
beat me up.
Before we go in first, you know, you're gonna have to first talk about the importance of Sarnetta Studio in the House of Consciousness, my brother.
All right, so shalom, all praises to the Most High, peace and black power to the family out there. We're here doing another sit-down session. I'm here with my brother and associate, Dr. Ali Muhammad, with Sarnetta behind the mic. Just want to let you know, you're not going to get nothing like this anywhere in the world. Sarnetta Studios, Sarnetta TV, Black News 102 is the premier channel if you want to get any information on what's going down in the Black conscious community. There's nowhere else you can go, nothing else that you can get that'll be able to top this. We got powerful information. We got real scholars that's on a come up, scholars that's been established, and we're upsetting the fabric of white supremacy in this society by bringing out this raw information that's going to change lives and be the catalyst for this new generation that's coming up. So y'all continue to stay tuned to Sarnetta TV and continue to tune in, and you'll see more of the likes of combatants like this getting in the ring, sitting down with civic builds, and actually doing something for the people for free, y'all. Peace.
Free. Peace. Indeed. Peace. Salam alaikum. Hotep. Black power. Love to all the House of Consciousness family. Listen, Sarnetta can verify this. Me and him sat down on this couch for the first time. See, it's 2015. That was like, what, 8 years ago?
Yes, sir.
8 years ago. Now look at what has happened in 8 years. Yo, listen, it's people in London, in South Africa who inbox me like, yo, when the next time you gonna be on Sarnetta Studios? So all over the world, Black people are now controlling information right here in the United States of America.
Yes.
We need to understand the impact that we're having. And if we understand the impact that we're having, we do our best to bring in the information like we go in today. This will be unique in the sense that the details of what we're going to bring is beautiful. So I thank Sarnetta, despite all of the homegrown and domestic hate you may have gotten.
Right.
Internationally, people are all over the world thanking you for staying consistent and bringing information. And my prediction, as I've said over and over again, is that Sarnetta TV, Sarnetta Studios is and will become the premier media outlet on the planet for Black people. So just let the ball keep rolling. The God gonna stay consistent, and we're gonna keep bringing this information. Love you. Peace.
All right, peace. All right, brother Dr. Ali Muhammad, we're going to start with you, brother, because you came out, you made the statement, you made the claims that the Quran was here before the Bible. There's so many people that want to know where you're coming from with that statement, because they all assume that the Bible was here thousands of years before the Quran. So I want to give you the mic and let you explain more about that right there. Talk to the people about that. And Brother Divine, I'll let you respond to that.
Okay. All right, peace. Let's jump right into this. Now, when we start dealing with the history that we are given from white people, we know that they have used it for their political means to bring about the objectives, aims, and goals that they desire as a race of people to control indigenous people all across the planet. We must understand that. So we are at somewhat of a disadvantage as a group in that if we are not doing certain types of work in archaeology and other fields yet, some of us are beginning to get into those areas, but we are at a detriment when we don't have that, and we are relying on the politicizing mechanism of Europeans to perpetuate what they want in the fields of archaeology and history. All right. There was a Islamic scholar named Al-Jahiz that basically said, he who doesn't understand his history will never understand his future. All right. So when we get into the subject of the Quran, the Bible, and other ancient texts, what we have to do is come up with systems, efficient systems, to cross-check what Europeans have given us, the conventional stories that they have given us, to take it out of the realm of belief and take it into the realm of sound analysis. So that's what you're going to get today. Now, come to this issue of Quran. First of all, my issue with Quran would be simple. The Quran was written by black people. All right? It was written by black people who lived in the geographical area that we know of as Egypt right now, and what we are calling the Levant or the Middle East. The history of it has been co-opted by others who came, later, and that geography was transposed into the area that we know of as Mecca now. All right, so I'll be able to easily prove that. That's important in the context of talking about the Bible, because when we say the Bible, what do we mean? We're usually talking about, if you're dealing with Hebrews, the Old Testament and the New Testament, in some senses, the 66 books or the 80 books or the books that were composed. My question today to my brother will be, who sat down and made, based on accurate history, to compose various texts together in what we are calling a Bible, and highlight when that happened, which I have it in my book already. I have a 437-page book. It already has the information in it. So this book is what I'll be using today to discuss with Divine. So that history of where these books were composed happened in what we know of as the Middle Ages. All right, the composition of what we're calling the Bible, where you look at all the types of Bibles, 30 different types of Bibles out here. But this consensus is, if you add in the Apocrypha, you got approximately 80 books, and if you're not, you got usually approximately 66 books. That composition happened by white people. All right, that is an actual fact that we'll be able to go through pretty quickly. Now, when we deal with where they got the text to compose it from, that becomes an issue of great detail. And this brother's going to prove what type of researcher he is based on the question he posed to me and I posed to him. And we come to a consensus on where did these texts actually come from that white people got together and composed. So it is a 100% fact that white people composed what we know of as the Bible in the Middle Ages. I'll be able to show that. All right. But what the real question will be, where did they get the text, the actual text, what we are calling in English, Genesis and Deuteronomy? Where did they get those from to bring about this collaboration of what we are calling the Bible? And what have they done to it since? All right, what are the original texts? How can we cross-compare them? And then ultimately, is the Quran or the Bible even good for people who are trying to come out of a mental grave? Is it even good? Is the Bible suited to raise so-called African Americans out of the moral, mental depravity that they're in right now? Is the Quran suited to do so? If so, what in it can we say is definitively a marker to do that? And what proof do we have? Has the Quran been good for black people? Can we go out here and look right now outside 125th Street and say, the Quran is good or the Quran is bad? And based on what? And then we go see the Bible and say, well, based on what? And then what will we need to do to make it good or bad? Or is it even worth it? Because the people who are in chemists say, man, we can throw that shit. We try all of it. But I'll say to you, half of what you think you know needs to be thrown in the trash too. And we're gonna go through it today. Because the issue is, all of it has been co-opted. The question is, who has clarity on all of it? And who can prove through sound experimentation and just elaboration on the usefulness of it. What is the usefulness of it? So my point, as someone, you see me wearing this, rocking this right here, this ancestral. This means that I didn't come from nowhere. I'm home. So this is a part of my ancestry born on this land. And when I go to search my ancestry, which I've done my DNA, and find out where I was from in West Africa, it goes back to Senegal. So now I can go to the places and show my ancestry, show the temples, the books, the thousands of books that were stolen, thousands of books that were still there, the science and medicine, architecture, all that. So now my brother might have a problem, because he's going to have to show me what a Hebrew actually did in history under the name Hebrew. Oh, that's going to be a big challenge, and that's going to prove what my line where I'm going to, what has happened to what we call the Bible. What has actually happened? Where are the Hebrew universities of the ancient past with the name Hebrew on it? Well, we can go and say, this is epigraphy, this is inscription, this is that, this is that. Where can we, how can, and then somebody might throw us all in the dish and say, did these people even actually exist? Which, you know, I definitely, go back to my book, will be able to elaborate on that. So I'm gonna pass the mic to my brother, because that's my intro to get y'all warmed up. And I'm gonna say to all black people out there, I know you on WIC, I know you on welfare, I know you a lesbian, I know you've been sucked up by this whole colonization scheme. So when you come to me, a person who used to be in the same streets, on the same drugs, on the same thing, and I went through a transformative process, don't try to knock me because you think I'm following Arabs, which I'm about to kill that.
Right, you know it.
Because it must be something in it that took me from the grave into a higher state of being. And a lot of our people who are claiming these ancient civilizations can't show the transformative impact, which is proof that they don't have the core of what the doctrine actually had from our ancestors. So I'm gonna pass it to my brother.
All right, come on, give me your opening statement, brother. Open up. You heard what it said.
So I heard everything Ali said, and I think what he said was very powerful. Just so people know off the bat, this is going to be a civic discussion. You're not going to see brothers throwing no ad hominem attacks or trying to, outdo each other in regards to ego-wise. But what we're doing is we're exchanging information, because at the end of the day, the general consensus is to give this information for you to people as a point of reference, so you guys can go back and study and look at the material that we're discussing. So today's subject matter we're discussing is, did the Quran come before the Bible? Now, my brother, Dr. Ali Muhammad, was very specific what he said, and I'm glad he said it that way, because the word Bible comes from Biblos, which means collection of books. So when you have a definition of Bible or Biblos, you have to look at what.
Say that one more time. Say it
again.
Okay. Yeah. So what my brother Ali has
Talk
done.
about what we're gonna do again. Like what's this topic?
Okay, you missed it, right?
Yeah, I missed it because my camera cut off.
Okay. So yeah, so we here outside of the studios. I'm here with my brother Ali Muhammad. He gave a great intro. What we're doing right now is we're not going to throw any ad hominem attacks against each other. We're not here to outdo each other and see whose ego is better. What we're doing is we're exchanging civic information as a point of reference for you, the people, to go back and research for yourselves to see if the things that we say check out. What we're doing here is paramount, because you're not going to get a lot of civic bills like this, or brothers with different schools of thought that's coming together to actually exchange information, to learn from one another and to grow. My brother Dr. Ali Muhammad right here just finished stating that the Bible and dealing with the Bible and the Quran, that the Quran came before the Bible. The important thing that he did was make a distinction, because Bible just means Biblos in Greek, which just means a collection of books. So when we're talking about Biblos or a collection of books, we have to look at chronology and see what point in time are we referring to. Now, time marker that my brother Dr. Ali Muhammad gave was the Middle Ages, which talked about the 6th century onward. So that means that I'd have to show my brother here a collection of books with the content that is in what we call the Bible today, prior to the 6th century. I have to actually give a manuscripts that you can see in museums today that have been carbon dated, and then through the use of paleography, have been determined where the geographical location was, what's the chronological order of when it was compiled, when it was composed, who was the scribes behind it, etc. My brother also asked about universities. Can we go to any universities in antiquity and see things that the quote-unquote Hebrews have done? We also mentioned, where's the word Hebrew at? Now, we know Hebrew is a more modern connotation, Hebrew. And if you look at the word Hebrew, it just means to cross over. But in the past, that was an internal term that the people used, but it was never external from the additional cultures, which I will show. We did the Exodus Memorial. The Hebrews went to the Exodus Memorial. That DVD and information will be out soon. I actually touched on how the other nations viewed the Hebrews, what they called them, how they identified them. And today, what I'm going to show is some of that information. I don't want to do too much, because I want you guys to go back and look at that. But in regards to the subject matter, I also need my brother Ali Muhammad to show us the manuscript evidence, primary source, manuscript evidence of a Quran that predates the material that I want to show in regards to the collection of books that we colloquially call the Bible or the scriptures. All right. So the reason why this is paramount, because what it is that we're talking about, people know when they deal with divine, the divines are the typical Hebrew, and that's no offense to my Hebrew brothers. They know that I'm very academically sound. I do a lot of research. I try to provide a lot of scholarship from a lot of sound sources. A lot of times I may go online and get a couple of sources, because I know a lot of our brothers and sisters, they don't read. And I want you guys to start reading So I'll give you a whole reference of books if you guys need it. But I pick online sources because it's a quick point of reference. You can type it right into your computer and look it right up yourself and research it. So this is very paramount because also not only are we talking about the origins of the Quran and the scriptures, who wrote them, right, when it was written, but also can we extract the substance from it, or the principles and precepts, and apply it in this immoral society today to build up black people. I will also show my brother that the people who originally penned the scriptures were black people. Just like Ali Muhammad says, the original Muslims were black Africans. I'm going to show that we have our roots also in Africa. And I will show the evidence of that, that the people at the time when this text was scribed were actually melanated people. And I've done this in the past, but since we're sitting here building, I don't know how much of my material my brother Dr. Ali Muhammad has seen as mine, but I will definitely exchange with him because at the end of the day, we have to give the people some moral substance, encased in spirituality, to give it back to our society. The problem is that we're suffering is the degree of atheism that is stripping us of our ancestral DNA, spirituality that has kept us in communal societies, that has kept us accountable to a power that's higher than us, whether you want to call it your great ancestors, or whether you want to call it a singularity, or whether you want to call it a great power, whatever you want to call it. We have to give credence, and we have to give credit, and we have to give all of our ardent attention to the power which has created us, and know that we are subject to this power on how we interface with one another socially, politically, and economically, because at the end of the day, that is what it's all about. Can this information that we discussed today be transmuted into a format that can build up black people and the condition that we're suffering outside today in our community? So with that, that's my opening, and I'm gonna hand it back to Sanetta before we go in.
Yeah, beautiful guy. Beautiful.
Okay, brother, who want to go first? Who want to take on the sword first?
I'll go first.
Ali is the prosecutor, so you gotta go first.
All right, now I want you to know that I took a couple of notes that you said.
Okay.
One of them, brother DivineProspect, you said your roots is in Africa.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a little
I'm gonna break
kind of hard
that down.
because other Hebrews that you're associated with, they tell you that they are not a part of Africa.
Yeah.
AOC, brother Hashab, ISUPK, brother Daniel, Lions of Israel, they tell you that they don't got nothing to do with about Africa. Africans are savages, so that's going to be a little contra.
You need to ask me what I mean when I say Africa.
I'm going to, when I get to it,
recent term.
I'm going to get to it.
Okay,
I'm going to give you the mic. But right
gotcha.
now, we're going to go into brother Dr. Ali Muhammad. Brother Ali, you going to show some slides or something?
Yeah. I want to show some slides, and I want to substantiate some points that will help us.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna start here.
Okay, here you go.
Now, terms. I'm gonna have to move back and forth a little bit just to get us. Can anybody see that?
Yeah.
Just to get us. All right, just there. Now, for the sake of linguistics and terms.
Yeah, Ali, sit right there. It'll be
Right?
better. Yeah, it's better. Because I can move up.
There you go.
So that people can see the slides.
Gotcha. All right.
Can you make it big so it don't cover that side? You know how to
You know
do it?
what? I can. This is PDF. I could probably make that smaller.
No, don't make it. There you go. There you go. That's good. All right. We see it. Okay. All right. That's good.
Now, one of the things that's important for all of us to understand, and the first thing that I'm going to use to kind of help with this issue of when something happened. This is going to probably be the hugest issue that we deal with. When did something happen? All right. In the context of the Quran, if you go out and you see Muslims today, they are practicing like the regular stuff that the Arabs do, like they do the Ramadan, you see them during the year. Calendars are important to history because you can take a document, right? And you can say, it has a writing on it based on this year, based on the system of calendars that we use. An example of how dysfunctional our calendars are right now is we use what's called a BC calendar and an AD calendar. So the year is supposed to be what? 2015 AD. All right. Sometimes they say Anno Domini. All right. Where did that calendar come from? Does anybody know? Allegedly,
the Gregorian calendar, or
what we call it the Gregorian calendar, and the number for it, the number 2015. Have they been using that number 2015 years? Absolutely no. So if you go back 2,000 years ago, nobody knew nothing about this calendar in the time. The evidence is nobody was counting down in the BC year. So if it was 99 BC, it wasn't saying the next year was going to be 98 BC. Nobody did that. All right, so question is, where did this calendar come from? And the general consensus is it comes from Pope Gregory, right? And that Pope Gregory actually used the calendar date, and he was recalculating the time of the solar year using his priests. That's a lie, though. I challenge anybody around to go get any document from Pope Gregory with an AD date on it. Anybody.
Yes.
I'm gonna start out paying you $100 per document. And then what I'm gonna do is, because I know you're not gonna find it, I'm gonna show you where the AD calendar actually comes in on documents. This started in what we call the 1500s, when you started seeing this number appearing on documents. That's 1,500 years from the time it said it started. Why is that important? Because when I show documents, I have to show what year is on the document. If there's no year, then I'm going to say, let's date the document if it's something that can be dated, like parchment, papyrus, whatever. So now we go into William Libby carbon dating. And if for some reason we can't do either of the one, we don't know when whatever was written down. So now we got to subscribe to belief. That's important. So now I mentioned the Muslims because they go do Ramadan, and their calendar is based on the 354-day calendar, the Arabs, and they got all our people following, right? When you go, I'm gonna, as we pass the mic, I'm gonna go to some of these sources, but Surah 18, verse 25, you have a proof of what calendar the people who created the Quran use. Surah 53, verses 1 and 2, and verse 49, you have a proof of how they calculated time. They calculated time based on the star Sirius, which they call Al-Shira, which is a plural, all right? Shin, Ra, and Aleph, a long I, which is a long A. Why am I saying that? Because this is the ancient calendar that people who had high mathematics use. So when you go to the 18th surah, they distinguish between their solar and star calendar and a group of people who they call the companions of the cave, Al-Kaf. And these people in the companions of the cave, they said that they would add a certain amount of days to their calendar. The number would be 309 years versus 300 years in that specific verse. The Muslims using a solar-based calendar and a sidereal-based calendar. The outsiders using a lunar-based calendar. Why is that important? Because when we go through all of what I'm saying, I'll be able to give you chronology and dates based on what the people wrote down, not based on guesswork. So before I do that, I had to lay that down. Timing is important. What was the name of the people who were a part of what we call Israel in the Bible? What was their name? Were they Hebrews? Did they call themselves Israelites? What names did they use? What was the most popular name? All right. So the Quran has that name. And that name has been used throughout history. And when you go to the province, like you got the United States of America, which is a geographical said nation state, you had a province called, that we use in English, called Judah. It was a province. You had different tribal clans in there coming in and out of this province, right? So right now, some black people might call themselves American, right? Mm-hmm. But we know from their lineage, they're not American like they thinking that they were white people. It's because of them being a part of a body politic, they call themselves that. So when you use the word Yahad or Judah in the Quran, it's specifically highlighting that it's a province of people. And then when you go to the actual black people, the name that was used was Ansar or Nasara, or you hear it as Nazarene, right? Nazarene. Anybody hear of Nazarene? Jesus the Nazarene? All right, it's important to highlight that. Because now I'm about to go into something. This, you can see the source, Epiphanius of Salamis. Now, I think that this is a pseudonym, but I'll cite it. I think this is a pseudonym. Because these are people who lived in Israel, and if you date it according to what I call a false chronology, this year is 318 AD. This year is 318 AD. All right? So, what did these people say who were in Israel, who were the real Israelites, who we call Nazarenes, who they call themselves Ansar? What did they say?
What was the date again? You said
the date 318 AD. I think that's a false date. That's the date given for the existence of this person.
Okay, I'm saying, is that for what you're presenting right here?
Exactly. This is a quote extracted from Panarion,
Okay, gotcha.
section 118. This is the author.
Gotcha.
All right, and this is what he's saying about the sect of what we would call Israelites, who at that time he identified as Nazarenes. All right, the Nazarene, quote, they were Judeans by nationality, because they were in Judah, originally from Galatis, Bashantis, and the Transjordan area. So we know that as the current area of the said Middle East Levant. The sect of Nazarenes also recognized the fathers, the persons in the Pentateuch. Everybody knows what the Pentateuch is, allegedly. That's supposed to be the first 5 books of the Bible, right? Right. Books that were kept. Sometimes they call it the Torah. Now, this is not the Bible yet. It's just books of the Bible. Now, look at what these Israelites or Nazarenes said. All right? In the Pentateuch, from Adam, they recognize these people as real people, and as a part of their lineage, who were illustrious for excellence of their piety. However, they would not accept the Pentateuch, which we call the Torah. Now, if you've never heard this before, this is your first time getting a class of people who were the original people of Israel, and I'm going to prove these people were blacks, who are saying they do not accept what we call the Torah, or what at that time in Greek, qualification, there's no such thing as Greek. So the language, I'll use the term that was used for that time for Punic. I don't want to qualify Greek because the word Greek comes in the Middle Ages as Grecia. All right, you see that? Am I blocking something?
No. Okay. Yeah. Just move over.
Okay. All right. So look, this is the Israelites or the Nazarenes saying they don't accept what became a part of what we call the Bible. And why did they say it? They acknowledged Moses and believed that he had received laws and legislation. Not this law.
I know.
But some other. So now wait, you got Israelites who are on the books from Greco-Romans who are saying, okay, we don't accept what we call to be a part of the Bible today, Pentateuch or Torah. They saying that's not ours. I've never seen one Israelite, one Hebrew ever quote this. And this is just the beginning. Why is it that they would have a record saying they don't accept that? Right? And I'm going to show the contradictions of why they would say that. All right. And so, though they were Judeans who kept all the Judean observances, they would not offer sacrifice or eat meat. Now, sidebar. You learn in Genesis 1:29, what would be the first time that you get a discussion on diet in the Bible, and it tells you that you should eat, I'm not quoting directly, fruits with seeds in it and plants with seeds. That is the diet prescribed. And then when you go jump down further to Noah 9, you can eat everything crawling, and then you get into other books and they split up and you can eat this. And so now you see a transition. This is what they're saying was not their book. And they're saying, this is important for me because if you can recognize the dangers of eating flesh, that says you have some type of scientific mind and experimentation about the quality of keeping your temple and your health. So that authenticates them further as a people who had some type of sound tradition that was handed down to them. All the stuff we learned about eating healthy then, this is thousands of years ago, not thousands, but relatively, according to the date, is old. They're saying we don't eat meat and make sacrifices. They claim that these books, now Look at what it said. Books, plural.
Yes.
It didn't say Bible yet because there wasn't no Bible yet. It was just these 5 books that people were saying was from Moses. And they saying, nah, homie, we Israelites, we Nazarenes, that's not from us. That's forgeries. All right? They claim that these books are forgeries and that none of these customs were instituted by their fathers. This was the difference between the Nazarene and others. Now, I take the position, and this is my position, that the Ansar, or the Nazarenes who lived in this area, were the primary caretakers of ancient texts. And they knew well enough what was happening with the forgery of their scriptures and their books. So now the first 5 books of what you're calling the beginning of the Bible has been negated by the people who are the core context of what you would call Israelites. They're saying it's not ours. Now, when you put that into context and you start walking yourself through the ancient text, the second most ancient being the Dead Sea Scrolls, as I go further, it's going to highlight where did these forgeries come from that are somebody trying to authenticate. All right? So just to give you an idea of what these words mean, Jews by nationality, gens, this word nationality means gens, which is by birth or race. So this is the first group. This is these people. Now, why are these people important to me? Because they're also in the Quran. They're also the people who founded Islam. Let me go to it. So you won't think I'm guessing. Because this is going to give a context for a need for a Quran. Why did they go back and rewrite their traditions? It was because people started playing with their texts, which eventually led to the Bible. I'm coming to it. All right, so Muslims, check this out. Let's go here. Actually, let me go back a little bit, because I'm going to come to the qualification of why I'm saying there was no Bible before, and what little pieces of what we consider to be the things that became the Bible were forgeries according to these people. So let me go to my source documents. Give me a moment. We got time. All right. Here we go. All right. So this is the Quran. Now, everybody who comes to Brother Ali and says Muhammad was an Arab, first you got to use the book that you say that he was a co-author or author of based on some type of divine revelation. Because if you're not going to use that source document first, you're disqualifying yourself. Because the Quran should be the best source, and then external sources should support your points. And here it is in the Quran. I'm going to disqualify the Arabs and bring in these Nazarenes or these Israelites. Because the Quran doesn't mention Israel for a reason. And I'm going to bring it up. This is Surah 9, verse 97 and 99. And what does it say? Al-Arab ashadu kufaran wa nifakun. The Arabs are the strongest in disbelief and hypocrisy. All right, so now whoever the author is, they're beginning to take an anti-Arab stance in this progression. And most are supposed not to be truly aware of the laws that Allah has revealed to his messenger. Word right here, Rasuli, who's supposed to be Muhammad at this point. So if the messenger is receiving a revelation or some type of gathering of facts or even proposing the authorship of the scripture, he's starting off with an anti-Arab position. Now, why is that? Let's keep reading. And of the Arabs, now, when you read a conventional Quran, this will be translated to, and the dwellers of the desert. So they try to hide the fact that this word right here, Alif, Lam, Alif, Ain, Ra, Alif, Ba, is there. That's Arab. That's not dwellers of the desert. That would be 3 words. All right? So now they're hiding the fact that Muhammad was not an Arab. They're hiding the fact that Muhammad was not an Arab. All right? So look, and of the Arabs are those who take what they spend to be an illegal cost. All right? And awaiting amongst them are the watchers. So let's keep going down. And it's going to keep qualifying the point, and then I'm going to get to where I want to go. Look, and of the Arabs, Wamin al-Arab. All right? or those who will proclaim belief in Allah in the latter period and consider what they spend to give them to bring them nearness to Allah and the prayers of the messenger. Surely it does not bring them nearness. Allah will bring finality to their faith. So all these anti-verses, then you go to the next verse. Look at what it says. And you need to see this, Divine. I'm going to show you this. Okay, good, good. All right, the next verse lists the people who are the original founders of the Islamic doctrine. And what word is used here that's mistranslated in the scriptures? All right. And the first of the first. All right. This means in the system of faith. Among the muhajizina. Sometimes this is spelled muhijar, but I spell it muhajizina for a reason. And the who? The al-ansar. Here we go. Alif, lam, alif.
Use your point.
Yeah, I want to show people. Here you go. Yeah, there you go. All right. Nun, sa, alif, ra. This is a beginning like the, A-L, the, alif, an, in, sari, ansar. That's the same word if you take off the prefix as nasar, or when they said nasarim. Same word. So now you have the Israelites under the word nasarim in the Quran. So now here they come. They are anti-Arab with Muhammad, trying to reinvigorate their history. So all the Quran was an attempt to rewrite black history after someone corrupted it with the first parts of what became known as the Torah. So now we get into this Bible. The Bible's still not here yet now.
You might want to go over that again.
Yeah, I'm going to go over it again. I'm going to go over it again. These are the people who founded Islam. This is the verse right after the Arabs. I went through 97, 98, 99. This is 100. So now when you come to the actual names of these people, all right, look at these names. Now this is important. And this is going to be geographical. Here's the two names. 1, 2. Some people translate this as Mu-Hijar or Muhajirina. And they say the Hijra was from Mecca to Medina. But what we're going to find out is that when we use the word Gaza, all right, Gaza is an ancient root. And this root is right here. But in what you're calling Arabic, which is not the name of the language, I'll get to that the next point. You have the alif, ba, jim. The J and the G are the same letter. All right, like you say in Hebrew. What? Let's go to Greek. Yeah, alpha, beta, gamma. Right. Then alif. All right. Bet, gamal. So the G and the J are interchangeable. But my point is, this word is the root of it is Gaz. All right. So you have Jaz or Gazina. And then the next word, which I already highlighted from that quote about the people saying that these books are not ours, is the Nazarenes. Here called Al-Ansar. All right. Pointer. Alif, lam, which is the cognitive. All right. And then you have Alif, Nun, Sa, Alif, Ra. All right. So you have the root of it is Nasar. You get later Nazarene or a different context. So these Ansar, the Muhajizina and the Ansar, and those who followed them with good conduct, Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with him, and he has prepared for them gardens beneath a river flow where they abide forever. This is a great attainment. So now you got, they are the first of the first, all right, in the faith to establish Islam. So now you go to the next verse, it hits the Arabs again. And those around you of the what? Hypocrite Arabs. Let's go down to it so you don't think I'm making it up. I'm going straight to the text. All right. Here it is, the word again. You see that you keep saying this word. Alif, lam, alif, ain, ra, alif, ba. Arab. Munafikun. All right. Munafikun. Nafikun. Nafik is a hypocrite. Someone who's saying one thing and doing another. So they calling the Arabs again hypocrites. So now here is Muhammad dissing the Arabs and highlighting the Nazarenes and the Muhajizina as the groups who actually founded Islam. That context needs to be, because these are the same people who said somebody was trying to forge their text and made up the Pentateuch, or what we call in the Torah that Hebrews use today. as an authentic Israelite text. You got two different groups saying these same things. Okay, so now I got that point down. Let's keep moving. Let's come to the actual dating of these things. All right. 3 minutes. All right. Let me move past. I know we're gonna get in some dialogue. I wanna go through. I got that point down. That point is clear. All right. So let's go to this guy right here. Oh, let me go back. Just on a point of clarity. Now, the name that these people in the Hijaz or the Muhajirin or the Ansar were called, and I'm going to have to qualify this as I'm going, is Saracen. Saracen was a name that outsiders used for them. All right? And here's a source right here showing you their geography. They were not in Mecca. A Christian bishop visited Jerusalem in 671 AD. His name is Archov. He stayed for 9 months in the city of Jerusalem and used to go around all the holy places on daily visits. All right, and the source is Adamnan de Loca Sanctus. All right, Bishop Archov. This is his quote. In that famous place where once stood the magnificently constructed temple near the eastern wall, the Saracens now frequent a rectangular house. This is in Jerusalem. These Saracens are the ones who are Muslims. All right, which they have built in a crude manner, constructing it from the raised planks and large beams. Why am I mentioning this particular place? Because this is the actual place you get the first Quranic verses. Here it is. What we call it the Dome of the Rock. I want to show it, and then I got my last point, and then I got to show you where this Bible, where's the Dome of the Rock. There it is, right there. There it is. This is the actual Dome of the Rock. This is the place of the oldest Quranic verses on the planet in epigraphy. Not on parchment, not on papyrus, not on any paper, in stone at this building. All right? So now, after he goes, I want to get into some of it to show. So now I have epigraphy to show where the first Quranic verses show up. All right? That's what I want to show. Not on no paper yet, because we ain't got the paper yet, because paper is going to start confusing us as we go through. I'm going to prove that. Once he starts presenting his, it'll be something that we can dialogue. Now let me go to this last one. This is my last point, and then he can come up. I'm coming to when this Bible was written down. Let's go through it.
Huh?
All right. I didn't even get to the Dead Sea Scrolls, so I'm going to prove that the Arab wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, man.
I'm going to prove that the Arabs actually wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, man, I got to see this.
The Arabs, you talking about?
White Arabs. White Arabs wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls. I'm coming. Hold on. All right, slow down. All right.
Ali, you might have all the Hebrews coming at you, man.
Hey, you know what? That's cool.
I asked you,
but you know what? That's my brother. They're my brother.
Yeah, no doubt. When I mean by coming at you, I'm talking about
information, man.
Yeah.
That's if Divine doesn't redeem them first.
Wait, Divine is about to go.
I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to be nice, meaning helping them. You know what I'm saying? Because we're trying to elevate the level of scholarship, not just with Hebrews, but Muslims as well. Yeah. A lot of stuff that Ali's saying, a lot of Muslims.
They have no idea. They have no idea. All right, so. All right, let's go through this.
You got the level text.
Okay,
check it out.
Yeah, that's a mathematics text. I'm familiar with that.
Yeah. We're gonna go in because this is what. Okay, so check it out. Catholic Church, you had no Bible. Got it? Okay. You had no Bible, and this is my timeline. I gotta go through my timeline first, and then we can go. All right. First Bible as you have it today from the Catholic Church, which was the Western Orthodox Church, came from the Council of Trident. They got together, and they took some ancient texts that were forgeries. We already established they were forgeries, and they codified them into what we are calling a Bible. That's 1545 to 1563. They had these councils where they were putting these books together. The first Eastern Greek Orthodox Bible was in 1580, and it's called the Ostrich Bible. All right. Now you have what's called the Masoretic text, which is also a Middle-Age text, and the general chronology, before I get into detail, goes from 7th century to 10th century, all right, on the Masoretic text. Then you have what's called the Aleppo Codex in Syria, all right. So the Hebrew text, I don't want to read that quote and not qualify. Hold on. I'll go to the part that start qualifying. I leave this big so we can see. Okay, this is my man.
Yeah, we're gonna deal with your man too. Got some work on that.
Yeah, it's my man.
Yo, Ali got some work.
All right. All right, so who is this guy right here I'm showing? This is Joseph Justice Scholar. He's a chronologist. All right? And let me show you some of the works that he's responsible for. And I'm going to break this down because this is important. All right. So in church history, you have a gentleman called, his name is misspelled, but it's Eusebius Cicero. All right? Eusebius was an early church father who was responsible for chronology. He put together a whole bunch of histories saying this person did this. St. Jerome wrote the Latin Vulgate, and then other chronologies came from it. So when you see me holding this right here, uh-oh, where's my paper? A little brown paper. That's it. That's it. There we go. Check it out. Put this in the camera. Put this in the camera. All right. So I'm not going to be able to go over all of these right now, but as we go on, I'm gonna hit each one. All right. Now you see at the bottom you have the 70. That's supposed to be the Septuagint. The Septuagint is supposed to have been written by one of the Ptolemies, all right, and gathered by Jews who were in Egypt at that time in the 4th century BC, all right? The problem with that is there are no original Septuagints. The first time you get an original Septuagint was allegedly from who? Flavius Josephus, a Jewish scholar who's supposed to have lived in the 1st century AD. But guess what? You don't have none of Joseph Flavius' original works. You can't go in any museum and say, oh, this is the first time Joseph Flavius wrote down something. This is the first time. You know who gave you all of Joseph Flavius, all of Eusebius chronology? You know who gave it to you? This guy, him. When he lived in the 1500s. He lived in the 1500s. So the person who gave you the oldest book, Septuagint, well, one of the oldest, before we get to the Dead Sea Scrolls, which branched out and gave you all of these, all right? Problem. He didn't exist. Latin Vulgate, St. Jerome. St. Jerome is a code name. His real name was Eusebius, the same as the person who allegedly collected his work. So we don't have no proof that none of these people existed. And if anybody can prove they existed, come on today with it.
Well,
because
Divine.
I know. I already know what he's about to go with. Okay. I'm not talking about nobody.
Right. Yeah, different.
I'm talking about Eusebius, Joseph Flavius, and these people who are supposed to bring us books that now don't exist. All of them came from Middle Age translations, starting from him, Joseph Justice Scholar. So I'm going to give you what he translated. All right. Chronicle of Eusebius, of Time and Type, all right, where he did a study of time. Manilius Astronomica, the first so-called astronomical text of Greco-Romans, all right, he's supposedly have given us. So let me give you a summation of what I'm trying to say. Joseph Scaliger was a 16th century polymath from France with Dutch ancestry. Scaliger is known most appropriately from his influence on modern chronology. Scaliger's work are important because it is he and his disciples who began backdating and construction of false personalities in history to support their new chronology. At the root of the attempt, in my estimation, was to create an ancient European or Greco-Roman chronology which didn't exist, so as to thwart the Afro-Asiatic chronologies already present, and to set a course to where humans would be deceived about time and events forever. All right? Scaliger and his team wanted to construct a new reality, so they went around the world and studied amongst black people. All right, so that's just my summation of it. All right, so let's go here. Am I running out of time?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me be respectful.
You got another minute.
Okay. All right. So this is his student, Dionysius Petavius. This is the man who gave you the AD calendar. Now, when you go study the AD calendar, they're going to tell you that another Dionysius gave it to you, and they give two names of Dionysius. This is the third one. All right. So we go now, because I have time in the rebuttals and other stuff to go through this. All right. This is my last thing reading, because I'm going to come to the actual Dead Sea Scrolls. That's going to be my bomb. All right. The famous Dionysius Petavius lived from 1583 to 1652. All three of the said Dionysiuses were chronologers and worked on Easter calculation data. That's based on astronomical data. Easter is supposed to be calculated based on lunar movements, not solar or star. Mysteriously, the last names of all these same in different languages means little. Of greater importance is that the discussion and said existence of the first two Dionysiuses could not happen without Dionysius Pedavius' teacher, Joseph Scaliger, because was he who brought us Eusebius's works with no original text, which allegedly contained the works of Dionysius of the past and all the prior works of Flavius Josephus that were allegedly to have survived via the works of Eusebius. The only problem is we don't have an original copy of Joseph. So let's show Josephus and then we go. Joseph. Let's show Josephus and then we done.
You said you're gonna show who?
Josephus. Josephus. I'm gonna show the New Testament. I'm gonna show his fake, and then I'll sit down.
The New Testament was fake?
I already showed the Old Testament. Look at the New Testament. I'm gonna show you. This is the New Testament now.
You better watch this, man.
I'm gonna prove. Now look at this. This is the other parts of the books of your Bible. After the first 39, all right, you got the what? The Gospels, and you got Acts of the Apostles or whatever. So this is my first analysis before I get to that. But this is my last page. I ain't showing nothing else until he goes. Now we already proved that the Nazarenes or the Ansar, who were the original Israelites, said that the Torah or the Pentateuch was not theirs. And there still wasn't no Bible yet. There was just a compilation of these 5 books being passed down as the works of Moses. They said, no, homie, that's not ours.
That's right.
That's what they said. So we still don't have a Bible yet. So now we're coming to what we call in the New Testament. This is Josephus, who I said don't exist. How do I know he don't exist? Look, if you go through all of the characters that he interfaced with, which is all 33, in my book, I got all 33 characters. Look, Philip, Judas, all these people. When you go to Paul, go into your New Testament. You know Paul was the one who made Jesus known, and he wrote all the epistles and all this. Look, Paul and Josephus were in the same cities at the same time in the 1st century AD. Never met each other, met the same people in the same cities. So now you have the whole chronology here. Philip in Josephus' War Book, chapter 3, section 7. Then you got the same Philip over here that Paul met. Judas, same Judas. Ananias, Ananias. Theophilus, Theophilus. Simon the Zealot, Simon the Zealot. Matthias, Matthias. John, John. Alexander, Alexander. Nicanor, Nicanor. I got 33 names. Now, either one of these is faking and is the other person, right? So either Flavius is faking, who's supposed to be a real character, and Paul didn't exist, or Paul existed and somebody made up Flavius Joseph. Or neither none of them exist and somebody else made them up. So how do we know what the answer is? The answer is we know for a fact that neither one of them existed.
Say that one more time. We
know for a fact that neither one of them existed. How do we know? Because their works, all of their work that we're using today, there are no originals. You can't go to no museum and say, oh, this is the original works of Flavius Joseph in Latin and Greek. You know who you have to go to? You have to go to the works of a 16th century Jesuit priest who actually went across the world, learned these languages from black people, then got together with other people, and then all of a sudden you start seeing the works of Flavius Josephus floating around Europe, floating around what we call in North Africa and the Middle East. All right, and now you have the same Paul. So now you have what we are calling parts of the New Testament, which I'm only starting with this. You got this is my point. You got fictional characters being created. That's the beginning of fictional characters in the Bible. Post the Quran. Post the Quran. All of this is post the Quran. So now, when you look at the Quran, which I'm going to let the brother go and I'm going to be rebutting what he says in the sense of looking at it and analyzing it, but I'm going to add in all of the data that proves the silver text. There's different names for the silver text of the Dead Sea Scrolls, when they were created and who created them and why. My position is that the Arabs, who, when they collected the school in Baghdad, started collecting these people who are now pale groups, calling them Yahad, calling them Jews, what we call Jews now, and then they set up the first writing of the Masoretic texts. All right. Prior to that time, there were none. There were none, except for scant forgeries in the past that had not been collaborated. So the Quran, in my position, was an attempt by black people to collect their history because it was being forged by other people.
Powerful, powerful, powerful first round opening by Dr. Ali Muhammad.
I'm going to have to take notes now.
Now, I want to say this. In order to be a good teacher, you have to first be a good student.
Yes.
And I have a couple of students in the chat room, and they watching and they making their comments. And them brothers are also teachers. That's Brother Polite and Brother Reggie. I want to give a shout out to my brother Polite and Brother Reggie. They are in the chat room, and they are definitely being a student right now, as well as a teacher. So with that, I want to definitely bring on the, I was about to say the young phenom, but there's only one young phenom, and we know who that is. All right, we know who that is.
Young prodigy.
Okay, there you go. Oh, I like that. We got the young prodigy. Is about to take the stand right now. The young prodigy. And he goes by the name of Brother DivineProspect.
Yes, sir. All right, all right. First, if y'all in cyberspace and the internet, I want y'all to give a round of applause for my brother Ali Muhammad, because he did a great job outlining some information.
Sir.
And I say that because what he's addressing is something that I always address, which is the scholarship of white Jews. And when he was talking about the conglomeration of texts, he's talking really about the house of wisdom, where a lot of the information was being consolidated from Christians, from Jews, from different people who were moving around, especially the Sassanids as well. The Sassanids were involved with that, bringing their information. And it was a collective of information that the white Arabs that he was saying was collected from all indigenous people in all parts of the land, and it was codifying it into a system of knowledge and sciences. And there's a particular date for that, and I'm gonna get into that. Now, the first thing I want to address with my brother Ali Muhammad, because I had to cross-examine his information, so I'm very clear and the audience is clear, and we can be on the same page. He's prosecuting the Bible in regards to the Quran coming before it. First thing I want him to do, no, turn that back on, sir. Okay. First thing I want to do is I want to address his first slide. If you can bring that up for me,
yes,
brother Nazarene.
So you're gonna cross-examine right now?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to be doing, cross-examine and then providing supplement information to what I'm addressing, so we can build. Only because my brother Ali is making a claim. He's posing a claim.
I'm posing a claim, so now you got it. It's something
it's just peer review. That's all it is, man. Yo, we got like a million slides.
Yeah. It's nothing. I'm coming to it.
All right, take your time.
Don't knock this off the brother time, because it's me. Right.
I would have known. I would have made a PowerPoint for today. Ali got like 500.
Well, yeah, these are like mini books.
Isn't that from your Lost Pages of Islam book?
Yeah. This is.
Shout out to my man Gorilla Hebrew in the building.
Shout out to Gorilla Hebrew.
He said, "Get him, Divine."
All right, so
there we go. All right, there we go. Now, I want to address this. What's the pen? Oh, this is a pointer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it. All right, now, my brother Ali brought out a great point in dealing with the Nazarenes.
Hold up. Whoa. Something happened here. Touch that.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, say that again.
All right, so I just touched that.
All right. All right, my brother Ali Muhammad touched on something powerful, and he was addressing what's called the Nazarenes. They were Judeans by nationality, originally from Galiletus, Bashanitis, and the Transjordan. The sect of Nazarenes, keep that in mind, also recognized as fathers the persons in the Pentateuch, from Adam to Moshe, who were illustrious for excellence of their piety. Keep that in mind. Also, however, they will not accept the Pentateuch 5 books itself. See, my brother Ali Muhammad is very good, but while he was doing this, and I've seen this before in a lecture that he did on Kalam El, shout out to Kalam El, and I was reading everything that he was posting. I know he was rushing through a lot of material, but I'm going to point something out to y'all.
Come on.
3 things. A sect of Nazarenes who were Judeans by nationality. They were known for their piety, and also they would not accept the Pentateuch by itself. I wonder why that's the case. So before we even jump down to their pious ways, which he's referring to about not making the sacrifices, because at this time there was no temple to make the sacrifices, only small synagogues that were there, because Passover is when they came to Jerusalem to go give the sacrifices. But when you understand, I'm about to show you at this point in time who the Nazarenes are, you're going to be like, wow, that makes sense. So look at this. He says, and so though they were Judeans who kept all the Judean observances, where would they get this information from if there was no text, unless it was tradition? It says they would not offer sacrifice or eat meat. Look, in their eyes, it was unlawful to eat meat or make sacrifices with it. Important. They claim that these books are forgeries and that none of these customs, what books are we referring to? These customs were instituted by their fathers. This was the difference between the Nazarene and the others. Who's the others? The other sects who make up the Judeans. Now, put the camera on me for 1 second, son. I'm going to do stuff from the dome, and then I'm going to go to information. All right? First and foremost, the date that Ali gave us here, you said was about 318 AD?
Yeah.
He said 318 AD. Now, 318 AD. Now, we're going to deal with the chronology that our people are familiar with. We're not going to deal with other calendrical systems, which I'll touch on the Enochian calendar as well, that a lot of people don't really bring up. But that science was there within the Hebrew Israelite community before they codified the calendar that we have today. But what I want to address for you guys is the date. It's 318 AD. Now, who were the Nazarenes? At this time, before we get to this period, Nazareth was a province, okay, that was established, okay, after infiltration from outsiders, where you had the Lebanon, Upper Syria, and you had South Judea was all broken up into different provinces, right? Nazareth was towards the north. Why is this important? Because a particular person who I think my proponent is saying didn't exist, which is Isa or Yahushua or Yahawashah, who we call, he was also purported to be from Nazareth. And he was called a Nazarene. If you go to Matthew chapter 2, verse 23, it states that. It states that he would be born in Nazareth and be called a Nazarene. Now keep this in mind, family, because prior to this, the Nazarenes were not considered a sect prior to this. Follow me. Now, after Yahawashah, Yahushua, whatever you want to designate him, after he passed on, whether some believe that he died, some believe that he was assumed into the heavens, after he passed on, there were two groups of people that really kept through to all of his teachings. They were called the Nazarenes and the Ebionites. The Ebionites, transliterated, or not transliterated, but translated means the poor ones, or those who are poor. Then you have the term Nazarene comes from Netzer, and we're going to get into that, which means to be drawn from something. We're going to get into that. Why is this important? Because these were the individuals who actually kept all of the real teachings of the real character, not Jesus, but Yahawashah Yahushua when he was on the scene. And these individuals are also quoted during that time period and later on because they were very distinct from the teachings that they were upholding. Why is this important? Because you have to study the character of Yahushua to understand who the Nazarenes were. And remember, this was one of many sects that was in South Judea at the time. They were not representative of everybody there. So let's deal with this information first, and then I have information on the TV behind Sinai, and we're going to address this. And I took a couple of notes because Sinai forced me to take some notes. I was keeping mental notes, but we're going to take some. I'm going to go over my notes. So let's look at these couple of things. First thing was, thanks, Ken. First thing was, he says, also recognize, look, the Nazarenes also recognized as fathers, the persons in the Pentateuch from Adam to Moshe, who were illustrious for the excellence of their piety. Why is that important? Because when you read the scriptures, Matthew chapter 5, which is very key, Matthew chapter 5 deals with the Sermon on the Mount, which people call the Sermon on the Mount. But Yahushua was teaching things to the people. What he was doing was he was exalting the substance of piety and not the form of piety that the hypocrites, the Pharisees, and Sadducees were employing with the people at that time. So it was a different degree of piety that they were doing that made them distinct from the Pharisees and Sadducees at that time. I'm going to show you something because I'm going to show you where these people come from after we address this. So once we understand that, it says, how they will not accept the Pentateuch by itself. Why is that the case? Because most of the prophecies that talk about this person and this person who we call Yahawashah Yahushua was also in the Nevi'im and the Ketuvim, the writings and the prophets. This is why they did not only accept the Torah by itself, but all the other prophecies that came way by the prophets themselves and what we call the Tanakh or the Old Testament were speaking on behalf of who this individual was. And one of those things were the fact that this individual, this character called Yahushua, will be born in Nazareth. You got to go through the prophets in order to get that. That's why they not only uphold that. Also, you got to look at the different sects, the Sadducees and Pharisees. One sect only believed in the Torah, and one sect believed in resurrection. The other sect believed in the entire Tanakh and no resurrection. You see, you have to understand who these distinctive sects of individuals are before you draw any conclusions to about 318. Look at the roots of who these people are before we get all the way to this period. So that's why they did not only accept the Pentateuch, because the Pentateuch here is different than the Torah. When you see Pentateuch, that's referring to the first 5 books that was translated in Greek, or we call colloquially what we call in Greek, the Pentateuch. The Torah was strictly Hebrew. Why is this important? Because when the Pharisees would go in and teach the people, they would teach them from the Septuagint, but they themselves had Hebrew manuscripts. See, the people at this time were speaking Aramaic. You understand? Hebrew was a religious tongue. Some people knew Hebrew, like who we call Shaul, who my brother brought up. Some people still spoke Hebrew, but they had to be learned in it in order to speak it, in order to teach it. But most of the people commonly spoke the language of their captivity, which is Aramaic. This is very, very important, okay? Now, the Septuagint, because it's the Greek translation, the reason why they didn't accept the Septuagint itself is because the Septuagint itself has certain discrepancies from the original Torah manuscript that they had at that time. And the Nazarenes was key on this. You know why? Because when you read the Synoptic Gospels that deal with the life of Yahushua, he talks about these things. He upbraids the Pharisees of his day. He tells them that they are withholding the keys of the kingdom from the people because they are telling the people one thing and doing something different. And because the people do not have the original Hebrew, they cannot check these individuals. This is very, very important, family, all right? Now, we're going to move on from there. It says, they acknowledge Moshe and believe that he had received laws. Where would they get this information from if they not uphold the Torah? See? It's very important. You got to look at this stuff. It says, not this law, though, but some other. Now, what are we talking about, some other? Around this time, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, most of the Pharisees, also have what's called the Oral Torah. That did not get codified until after the Bar Kokhba revolt of the second Jewish or the third Jewish war with the Romans. Then you had a codified of the Oral Torah, what some people call now the Talmud, which consists of the Gemara as well as the Mishnah. Then we also had the Midrash. The Midrash gave commentary on the Torah, and the Targums were paraphrases of what we call the Torah. Keep all of these things in mind, write it down, go back, and I want you guys to research this, because now we're looking at 300 years displaced from when this incident had taken place. Now, let's keep moving. And so, though they were Judeans who kept all the Judean observances, they would not offer sacrifice or eat meat. Why is that the case? We're going to deal with that. They were Judeans or observances. Where would they get these observances from? Either by tradition, or they had a copy of the Torah, or they were familiar with the Septuagint part, which is called the Pentateuch. Why is this important, family? Because when you see it says they would not offer sacrifice or eat meat, they didn't offer no more sacrifices because they believed Yahushua was the greatest sacrifice. This is why they did not offer sacrifice anymore. And you know why they didn't eat meat? They refrained themselves to meat because a lot of the meat that was being offered and the places in the marketplace they would go to eat were being offered to idols first. You got to keep this in mind. Why this sect did the things that they did. 300 years later, when we get somebody writing on them, you have to do the research before you get to this point, period. It says, in their eyes, it was unlawful to eat meat or make sacrifices with it. So they had a particular vegetarian diet or vegan diet, however you want to call it, because they were very superstitious that the meat that was being offered to them were being offered first to idols and being sacrificed. And when you study the Maccabean revolt, you'll understand that a pig was slayed by Antiochus IV on top of one of the altars. And then from that point on, people were giving sacrifices to idols, the meats. And you'll read this in the writings of Shaul, who my brother pointed out as being Paul, where he talks about this. And this is something that was highly debated around the quote-unquote early churches at the time, all right? Now, it says right here, they claim that these books are forgeries and that none of these customs were instituted by their fathers. What are they referring to here? They're talking about the Oral Torah, because the Nazarenes was following Yahushua, who was a Karaite Hebrew. What's a Karaite Hebrew? Karaite Hebrew is a Hebrew that only deals with the Tanakh itself. They don't deal with any other oral writings, oral Torah or any other additional writings. They only deal strictly with the Tanakh itself. This is why you have this here, and this is what they refer to, the books that were forgeries. Because what was happening was they believed that the Oral Torah was usurping the scriptures. And this is something that Yahushua came on the scene, and he was condemning the priests for doing, because he was telling the priests that you guys are not really following the laws out of there. You have lost the way. I'm going to touch on the way, which is Yareh, which is the root word for Torah. Yareh means a direction that you shoot an arrow towards the mark. He was bringing them back to what we call the Torah because they were going through so many customs traditions. They had veered away from the Torah, and this has confused the people. So I wanted to really give you guys some history on that because I have a lot of notes over there that I'm getting to. But I just wanted to address this so that way we have clarity, because this is a lot of good information, but I want to address every point so you know historically. Now, if you really want to see where the Nazarenes came from, you have to study the Essenes. See, what my brother is going to show, and I'm going to see what he's going to show. What he's going to show is that there were different sects of Hebrews all over the known world at the time. We have different text types from these different Hebrew scribes all over different geographical regions. Why is this important? Because not one person or one entity had access to all of these manuscripts at any given time. When we do carbon dating and paleography, we're able to determine the different text types, different areas they were, and there was no one entity that could have taken all of these manuscripts. They have created them themselves and the different dialectic scripts that they were where they was composed. This is very important. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I'm gonna jump on the second point.
All right, you finished with that?
Yeah, finish with that.
You ready over here?
Not yet, not yet. I'm gonna talk a little bit more. All right, now the second thing that my brother brought out was talking about the Masoretic text. Now, what I'm gonna show you guys is books or biblos or collection of books. Whether it was officially codified or not is not important. I'm gonna show him the manuscript evidence prior to the 6th century. Want me to stop?
Yes.
Okay.
Prior to the 6th century.
He's showing that it exists before Quran.
Yeah. All right. So we're dealing with the subject matter, which is the Quran that came before the Bible. Now, I'm going to give you manuscript evidence prior to the 6th century of books that were going around and people that quoted from these books that were floating around in different regions at the time. And the reason why this is important because not one entity had access or control of all of these manuscripts. There's over 10,000 New Testament manuscripts in existence. Over 10,000, 5,000 of them are Greek. And they were floating around in different geographical locations. And when you understand what was going on in history at the time, not one entity had control over each and every one of these manuscripts. And when you do paleography, which is studying the scripts of different manuscripts, you can identify the area that a person or a scribe was writing from based on what was written there. We're going to get into that when we deal with the Kufic script, the Ma'il script, the Mashq script, which we're talking about the Quran now. And I will show you manuscript evidence of the different Qurans that we have in existence, such as the Samarkand Quran that we have, the Tokapi Quran, the Sana'a Quran. A manuscript. I'm going to show you all these manuscripts. And I'm going to give you the carbon dating on it and the paleography on them. And when we look at this, we're going to see, did all of these Qurans that we had in existence, did they predate the manuscript evidence that I'm about to show you? Because I have more than one source. Now, my brother Ali mentioned several sources. He mentioned what's called the Silver Scrolls. He mentioned the Dead Sea Scrolls. He mentioned the Septuagint. I have way more manuscripts than just that. But we're going to deal with those two. Let's say I was to give Ali that. That's light work. I got about 7 or 8, 9, 10 other manuscripts that I want him to address. And I want him to show me how these manuscripts that he said was written by one entity now in the Middle Ages, how they had access and how they were controlling these other manuscripts that were there today through the use of carbon dating. Some of them was actually argon dated, but carbon dating and as well as paleography. This is very, very important. Now, he also talked about epigraphy, and I might even get into the artifacts where we have scripts from the scriptures on artifacts. I will give him that too if he wants it, if time permits. So the Masoretic text now came about in the Middle Age period, like my brother Ali said. The reason why the Masoretic text is very important is because before you had the Masoretic text, which had the Tiberian vocalization system. Tiberian vocalization system is a diacritic marks in the kudat or the kud that you would have marking underneath the text. Before that, you had the Babylonian and the Palestinian vocalization system on the earliest Masoretic text. And the reason why you had these dots or these markings there is because they was on the top. And this was as the language was developing and as they were encountering other foreign entities that they were actually teaching the text to at this time. Why is this important? And I didn't get to my notes yet, but let me get them off the dome first, right? Get back over here, Sa. Thank you. Now, the Masoretic text, right? The Masoretic text started the first diacritic marks on the Nikudat. You have the same things if we look at later Quranic manuscripts. The earliest Quranic manuscripts did not have diacritic marks. Is that correct, my brother Ali Muhammad? Would you confirm that?
I would.
Okay, and I'm gonna show you guys. You have the manuscripts, right? All right, look. So why is this important? Because you have to look at what was going on in history at that time. At the time of the Masoretic text, Tiberias was the city where all of the scribes and the Pharisees had relocated to after the Bar Kokhba revolt. When they went into this region, which is close to Syria, you had an influx of different entities or ethnic groups that were there. And these different groups and ethnicities that were there were speaking also Indo-European languages. Yeah. They did not just speak the Semitic tongue, they also spoke Indo-European languages. You're going to say, well, why is that important? You got to look at Ben Asher. Ben Asher and them are the ones that are very important when we're going to look at these manuscripts, because the most important ones are the Aleppo and the Aleppo manuscript and also the Leningrad manuscripts. And these are part of the Masoretic text sites. But what I'm going to give my brother comes before the Masoretic text sites, because you got to look at the other vocalization systems that were being used. You have what's called the Mathres Lectionis vocalization system, which I use a lot. And this is a way of interpreting the text without the diacritic or Nikud. Because now you have suffixes, prefixes, and emphases, and all these things designate doubling as consonants or vowels. And we have the same thing in the Quran. Quran has I, and ah. When you use the Mathres Lectionis, which means mother tongue rendering of the Hebrew, it's the same and ah. How do you get that? Because what they did was they take all the living languages that are Semitic, they do deductive analysis, and what they look at and see on all these languages. We're talking about the Samaritan, we're talking about the Syriac, we're talking about the Arabic, we're talking about the Hebrew, all of these Semitic languages, right? Are the ones that are related to them, such as the Ge'ez, the Amharic, etc. All these Semitic languages, they do a deductive analysis, and they say, hey, out of all these languages, what are the most common denominator vowel pronunciations? And what they discovered was and ah. This is why when you hear my brother speak the Arabic, you'll hear him only say and ah. You don't have the E's, you don't have the A's. This is important because when you're dealing with Indo-European people and you're a Semitic priest and you want to get the text out to these people, you're going to have to use or incorporate a diacritic system where they can also pronounce the language when they read the text. This is very important. You got to study the Bar Kokhba revolt, because this is where all the people migrated to after the Romans kicked them out of their homeland. All right. So that's the Masoretic text. That's the Middle Ages. But there are several text types. Now, I'm going to defend today both the New Testament and the Old Testament, right? Because I could just get Ali on the Old Testament alone, but I want to deal with the New Testament because he brought it up, and I want to defend it, right? The reason why I say this is because you have the Alexandrian text type, the Caesarean text type, the Western text type, and you have what he mentioned, which is the Byzantine text type, which you get the majority text that comes from, and then the text receptus was formed off of that, which is inserted into what's called the King James Bible. See, you got to study all these manuscript evidence, and I have all of them. I have facsimiles of all of them. If my brother Ali wants to see them, we can go over it in Hebrew, and I can decipher it for him, so you can see what I'm talking about when you deal with text types. Let me give my brother a question. Ali, do you study the manuscripts of the Quran, the ones that existed, such as the Samarkand, the top copy, the Sanaa manuscript? Have you looked over these manuscripts?
I have.
Okay. Now let me ask you a question. What does ma'il mean in Arabic?
Give me the letters.
The letters? Well, I would say it in Hebrew.
Yeah, it's okay.
Hebrew. So it would be mem, and then you have a diacritic mark there, and il. So more than likely it'll be an infix, which would be I, and I could be a heric, so that could be a wav. I'm sorry, a yod, not a wav. And you have el, which is lamed. So ma'il. What is ma'il? Because it's similar in Arabic. And the reason why I'm saying this to you, because anytime you do paleography or manuscripts, you have to identify the techniques.
Right.
Ma'il means sloping or slanted. And when you look at all of the manuscripts in Medina or Mecca from that time, the Arabic that was being used was written with a slanting or sloping script. It was written like this.
Sure. That's the
when you look at the Kufic script, you have a totally different script altogether, and then you have the calligraphic script as well. You have to look at these manuscripts to determine who was writing it, where they was writing it at. Right. Now, my brother, I think also he pulled up let's see. Let me bring it. He pulled up the House of Wisdom. We went over that. Oh, and I'm gonna make this point because I don't want to take up too much time. I want to show 2 slides. Thanks. All right. Now, when we look at the Quran, what I have to pose back to my brother and cross-examining him, he has to be able to show me the ma'il or the mashq dialectic scripts of the Quran, because the only one that we have in existence, which is in the British Library Museum that you guys can check out, that is dated to about 790 AD. Now, if the Quran was written outside of Kufa, because we understand that the Umayyad Empire brought, well, I think my brother's going to address this because this is probably like white Arab stuff. But when the Umayyad Empire had relocated, all right, because we had Ali and them relocating to Kufa, which is in Iraq, right? They relocated to Kufa, right, going towards Iraq. From Medina or Mecca, you have different scripts in that time. Now, the Sassanids, right, Sassanid Empire, the Persians were in control of that area at the time. There's a reason why I'm telling you guys this, right? Prior to that, in the area of Medina, Mecca, they were using Ma'il, and they were also using the Mashq, which are the different dialects that was being written. When you look at any Quran, and you do it through the eyes of paleography, if no Quran in existence today is written in the Mashq or Ma'il script, then that means that it was not written in Mecca or Medina or any place outside of Kufa, where we get the Kufic script, which is more of a calligraphy type of writing. Very important, because he has to produce me the manuscripts that I'm going to examine now, because I see him pull a couple of them up. I'm going to examine, I'm going to show you guys how paleography 101 works. Right. I'm going to examine the manuscripts through the means of paleography to date it, and then I'm also going to ask them from the carbon dating for those same manuscripts, because I want to see if they predate all of the manuscripts that I will produce. Now, let me give you an example of a few of the manuscripts that are in existence. We have the Silver Scrolls, right, that he discussed. That comes from Numbers, that has to do with the Aaronic priestly blessing. And that shows us that a Torah was in existence at about 600 BCE, right? Because this is what it was derived from. You also have the Septuagint. He said that we don't have any of the autographed Septuagints, and I'll give him that, but we have some from the 2nd and the 1st century BCE. So we may not have it when it was reportedly written at 300, but we have from the 2nd and 1st century BCE. You also have the Dead Sea Scrolls. The Dead Sea Scrolls were not only just, and it was several caves now, but different types of writing, which he cannot lump into one category, because when they discovered it, they didn't discover all of them together. When they put them in a newspaper, like my brother Ali has said, they say, oh, we're selling it for cheap. The same example is when you buy something off eBay. I bought an item off eBay 3 years ago. I didn't know how much it was. It was a coin. When I went to a pawn shop, they got an expert to come and look at it. They said, yo, you know how much this coin is worth? I said, I didn't know. I was just selling it for it. They said, no, we'll pay X, A, B, and C for it. I didn't realize the value of it until I had an expert examine it. Anytime you deal with the black market, where people are taking items and don't even know the value of it, they're selling it for cheap. Because these are people indigenous to the land that are just trying to make money to buy food, clothing for their families. So when we find these shepherd boys that are throwing rocks and they hit a jar and break the jar open, and they say, oh, what is that? And they discovered it, and they discovered it, and they pulled it out the cave, and they went into the hands of a black market dealer, somebody that was dealing with antiquities at the time. They didn't know the value of what it is they discovered. So I say this because my brother Ali is really fighting the white Jews. He's not fighting no melanated Hebrew. No. So let's keep going. Septuagint, the Dead Sea Scrolls. Again, the Septuagint, Dead Sea Scrolls have different writings, because the Septuagint was written by different scribes than were the Dead Sea Scrolls. When we look at the Paleo Hebrew that was written on the 2 amulets that we have for the Silver Scrolls, the calligraphy on there, the paleography on it is much different than what was written on later on manuscripts such as the Septuagint, as well as Dead Sea Scrolls. We also have the Samaritan Pentateuch, which is very important, because when you go through the paleography, you see it dates back to 122 AD. And the tradition dates it further back to Aaron and his scribes and his sons actually writing the text. And if you look and examine the text by the indigenous people that created the text, you'll see paleography-wise, carbon dating-wise, it was written in a different geographic location from people that did not know who was writing the Dead Sea Scrolls. Very, very important, because it was in 2 different geographical locations. So you got to show me somebody that's going around collecting all these manuscripts at that time, which was not true, because we didn't discover something until later on. At that time, collecting all these manuscripts, or created them in different places and then put them in different areas. You have to show me who this person was. You have to give me academically peer-reviewed information that showed me a person or entity that is writing all these different scripts, placing them all around the world. You have to show me that. And I'm just talking passionately. Don't think that I'm. No,
but I want that. That's giving me. I'm
right. So you got to show me an entity that has controlled all of these manuscripts, and no entity has done that. Now, that's the Samaritan Pentateuch I just gave you. Have you heard of the Cairo-Geniza manuscripts?
Yes.
Okay. These were dated about 870, and these came from Africa or Egypt, not the Byzantine Empire. Now, you got to understand, the Greeks and the Romans were using the Septuagint because that's the language they spoke. So when we talk about the Byzantine Empire, and after the Nicene Council, and I'm talking anti-Nicene, after that Nicene Council and further councils where they start to codify the scriptures, they start to talk about what is monophysitic and does Christ have dual natures, is all that foolishness. That's a bunch of foolery that you're going to get from Greek and Roman, Caucasian, Europeans. All right, this is stuff you're going to get from them, not the many people that have written the text. And I will show him the scientific evidence of the remains of the people in that area who are actually writing these texts. And I'll show you that they were melanated people based on cranial examination, based on bone structure, based on DNA of the bones as well. I'm going to show my brother this. I have the evidence here. So not only are we doing the Cairo-Geniza manuscripts, okay, which is one of many. We talked about the Aleppo and Leningrad. That was later on during the Middle Ages. You also have to look at what's called the Coptic Church. The Coptic Church had the Sahidic. They translated the Hebrew and the Sahidic. They translated the Greek and the Sahidic. And that became one of the first literatures in Coptic language was the Bible, and that was 2nd century AD. And I'll show you the museum with that, and I'll show the carbon dating on that. My brother wants it. He also has to address that. Then he has to address the Peshitta. The Peshitta of the Old Testament of Tanakh was translated into the Syriac in the 2nd century AD. The New Testament was translated in about the 5th century AD, all before the 6th century AD. So now I'm giving all this evidence now, and this is just a few. I got about 4 more up my sleeve. I want him to see him address each and every one of these manuscripts from a paleographical standpoint. I want to see him address each and every one of these manuscripts from a carbon dating standpoint, and I'm going to show him the museums. Not only that, I want him to address the unicles and the P fragments. They have over 128 P fragments. These are all the museums, and all of them date before the 6th century, and all of them talk about the New Testament. They have fragments, and some of them even codexes, such as P45, P46. P45 gives you the entire Synoptic Gospels. P46 gives you the Pauline writings, and these have been dated to happen before, way before, okay, the 6th century AD, carbon dating and paleography-wise. So my brother has to deal with unicles. Unicles, as you know, with unicles and miniscles. A unicle was when the text was being written in all uppercase letters in Greek. And then later on, as time starts to pass on, it started to be written with upper and lowercase. That's what's called minuscules. So you got to know the difference between both of those because, again, we're dealing with paleography. And I don't know how much paleography my brother has studied, but then he has to show me that all of these documents are forgeries. He has to show me the carbon dating of all these documents to say that they are. He has to also look at these documents and show me via paleography, if he doesn't agree with carbon dating, how the paleography is on. He also has to show me a Quran that existed before all of these documents, not just a few lines, an entire Quran. Now, my brother talking about Josephus. I'm not even going to deal with Josephus. He can have Josephus, right? Because I have other people that quoted Josephus around the time that he was supposed to live. I'll give him Josephus. I even give him Eusebius. He can have it. But you have a wealth of European or Greek converts to Christianity called the Church Fathers. You have the Apostolic Church Fathers. You had the Apologist Church Fathers. And then you had what's called the Post-Nicene Church Fathers. Irenaeus is one. Clement of Alexandria is another one. You have Justin Martyr was another one. Origen. All of these people have quoted from the existing manuscripts that they had at that time. They had books that was compiled at the time. Now, it may not be what we have today, but they had manuscripts that was flowing around that time because they were trying to hurry and get this message out to the people. Now, you got to understand, the original text of the New Testament was not written in Greek. Greek was a secondary language that was translated in. The original language was in Hebraic and Aramaic. And we have testimonies from people who attest to this. This is very, very important because you got to understand this. By the time it got into the hands of the Greeks and they started passing it, the doctrine started changing. For example, you have what's called the Markian priority. The book of Mark is the first gospel that was written. And how do we know that? Because when you look at the books of Matthew and Luke, the only time they agree is when we're looking at or comparing it to the book of Mark. The Markian priority is very important because Mark was believed to live in Alexandria or Egypt or Africa. This is very, very important because when you study the Alexandrian text types and you compare it to the Byzantine text type or the majority text, you're going to see different discrepancies and anomalies in the text. So the Markan priority does not include the virgin birth, which my brother touched on. Not here, but he touched on another lecture he did. And not just the virgin birth, also the resurrection story was further interpreted and embellished later on. That entire story is not in the book of Mark. The book of Mark stopped actually at verse 9 and the chapter 16. Very, very, very important. So I'm going to end up with this.
Say that again.
Which part?
The last sentence.
Oh, the last part. The last part is when you look at the earliest manuscripts of the book of Mark, it ended at Mark chapter 16, verse 9. Anything after that was later on interpolated, and you'll see that in later text types. All right, just like you have the Johannine comment, and this was a scribal note that was inserted into the text, which is 1 John chapter 5, verse 7. That was also inserted later on in the Byzantine text types. This is why the text types are very important. Then you also have the Western text types, which deal with the Latin Vulgate, which I don't even, I deal with it, but I don't like it because it's not written by Melanin people. But that even predates, and we have a few of those, predates the 6th century. So he also has to address that. Now, if he wants museums for all these manuscripts, I have it on my laptop. I will give it to him. He'd have to go to these museums and be able to show me that these museums have forged all these documents. He'd have to show me the entity, that was a source of that entity, either saying it themselves firsthand or third person, who claimed to have distributed all these manuscripts before the 6th century. He has to do that. Then he has to go to the Quran and show me through carbon dating of the Quran, because I will show him a Quran in existence before Abd al-Malik was considered to be the Muhammad or given the epithet Muhammad. I'm going to show him a recent discovery that my brother probably doesn't know about. But I'm going to show it to him. It's very important. It's also the Sunnah, which is another manuscript that I also have. It also predates Abd al-Malik, and it refers to an individual called Muhammad. If Abd al-Malik is Muhammad, and I'm not taking that from my brother, he'd have to show me that these two manuscripts are forgeries. He'd have to show me that. So that was just my cross-examination. I'm going to give the mic back to my brother. I didn't even get to show my slides, but I did everything off the dome. But if he has a question about any of these sources that I'm speaking of, my laptop is right there. I will bring it up on a big screen so that way I can validate all the things that I'm making. And with that, the ultimate objective is to get us back to the indigenous style of writing. The Hebraic mind and the Western mindset are two different things. You guys can go back to my YouTube channel, Kingdom Harvest Ministries, or go to Sinai's channel where I dealt with the Hebrew language, and I was showing people the differences between Western thought and Semitic Eastern thought. All right? Oh, okay. Yeah. So with that,
I do have a question. Though. I have two.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, because you keep my. All right, first question, and this is going to be a very clear and concise question. And the question is,
yes, sir.
Out of every one of the documents that you just mentioned, every one of them, I want you to show me one primary text that has an actual date on it from the calendar that the people who constructed it.
Oh, I see where he's going. Okay. Now
I'm going. I got one more question.
Okay, good. That's a good question because now you're looking at different cultures now. So now what he's doing is he wants me to answer something from one culture that a practice of another culture did. For example, when we look at the Quran, the Arabs had their own dating system or calendrical system, and they marked their manuscripts. Now, what you got to understand is that a lot of the people that were writing the biblical manuscripts, a lot of them were not as educated as the Pharisees or the upper class. So a lot of them did not include dates in the text. So I can't produce something that's not there. That's why we have to look at paleography and carbon dating in order to determine when these manuscripts were written. Because a person can write something on the text itself, and it can be misinterpreted as far as dates is concerned. This is why chronology is very important. Oh, and one other thing I want to answer before my brother gets the mic. That's the second question. You brought up scavenger, right? Now, the problem with scavenger is that, I don't know if my brother, I'm sure he knows it, but I know he's not showing it. Scavenger was a rebel at his time. Not only was he in conflict with the Jesuits, which I will show you, he also was one of the main people after the Renaissance period that was saying, yo, your dudes are liking the Greeks and Romans too much. We need to also include the Persian chronology, the Babylonian chronology, the Kemetic chronology, and the Hebrew or Jewish chronology. He was doing something revolutionary at that time, and he was expanding the chronology of not just the Greeks and the Romans, but also addressing all the other cultures. And if you look at the history from that point on, you'll start to see more people start leaning toward Egyptology. and start using Kemet as the major dating platform for every other culture and antiquity. So you can answer your second question.
Divine, you said you can't get no primary evidence?
No, I didn't say that.
No, okay.
I didn't say there's no dates
What
on
he
it.
said, I can't give you what's not there.
Yes.
All right, now, so the second question, since none of your documents have dates on it, I want you to explain to the people from outside of the Bible, not using the Bible, outside of the Bible, a Hebrew chronology system or calendar that's on a document outside of the Bible. Okay. Or a verified biblical text.
All right. So we have what's called the Enochian calendar, and that comes from the books of Enoch. That was one of them was discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Another one was also discovered, and what my brother should know, as the Ethiopian Tahido Church. They also have a copy of the book of Enoch. I have it here as well, a translation of it, if you want that calendrical system. We also have the Giza calendar that dated and talked about the harvests. And what it was that it was a system for the people to remember at what times, right? We call Nisan, different dates in Hebrew, that you were to sow and you were to reap. So the Giza calendar predates all these manuscripts that I just showed my brother. So the people were using a form of primitive calendrical systems at that time. You have to study both of these calendrical systems in order to ascertain, alongside and correlate with the text, to determine the different regions that these people were in and the calendar system they were using, because you're going to have different time of harvest in Kemet than you would have in the Levant region. It's very different. And that's very, very important that you guys need to study that. Agriculture is very important. I didn't get into the Natufians yet, which I'm going to address, who are North Africans that went into the Levant region and merged with the indigenous people that were there. And they were the first ones in that region to start what's called wild crop harvesting before we had the agriculturalists came onto the scene. This is during the Neolithic period, before we get into move past the Stone Age, going into the Iron Age. This is very, very, very important. All right. Now I'm give it back to him. Those are the two questions you asked, right?
Last question.
Okay. I think I got another question. Okay.
Last question.
All right, gotcha.
Last question. Was the Hebrew calendar,
Which one?
any one of them, any one of them, Hebrew?
Okay.
If there is a biblical Hebrew calendar,
Yes.
let me rephrase the question. Was the calendar inside of the Bible or outside of the Bible, amongst these various Hebrew groups, was it a lunar calendar? Was it a solar calendar? Was it a star-based calendar? Or was it a combination of any of them?
Gotcha. All right, there were various calendars. You had a lunar calendar, which they use typically today, based on the new moons that give us the different months. And there was also a solar constellation calendar. And it was also a harvest calendar that just dealt with harvest and didn't deal with the solar or the lunar at all. So we have three different types of calendar systems that use the lunar, that use the solar, and that didn't use neither, but just dealt specifically with the harvest times. So when we talk about a dating system,
And where are those? Where are those recorded at?
what you mean?
Any of those calendars? Where are they recorded?
Okay.
Where can you say, okay, that's where we know it comes
All right, so I gave him the Dead Sea Scrolls version of the Book of Enoch. I also gave him the Sahidic text. That's essentially we're talking about another Book of Enoch that we have in the Ethiopian church. Is that developed from the Coptic until it made its way down to Ethiopia and Eritrea. And also the ones for the harvest, the Giza calendar was something that was being used in the Levant region for the people in that area. So as the text was formulated, and the Giza calendar is on an artifact. So this is not even in manuscript, this is an artifact. When the people had a harvest calendar system. Now, dating that my brother is utilizing here was not used by every culture. I can give you several African cultures that did not have specific numerical dates on it. Because remember, who brought numbers, as we know today, as 0 to 9 to the Western world? The Arabs, right? Because all the other cultures would use the star constellations and have a different, for example, if you look at the Imaginary, you have strokes that indicate numbers, but it wasn't the same numbering system that we have today because we got that from the Arabs, right? Or Islam. Now, the reason why I say this is because every culture did not document time the same way. And to force one culture to do something that was not standard to them, that another culture is doing, is very unfair. You know what I'm saying? That's just like, if I'm from a particular culture here, and you're from a particular culture across the seas in Africa somewhere, and I have a TV and I have all these things, and I say, hey, this person's not living in 2015 because they don't have TVs. They don't have cell phones. They're not using the same calendar that I'm using here. And for me to superimpose that to another culture would be very unfair because now we're trying to standardize something that was different from each culture's, and each culture will have their own system on how they handle their business. Okay. So I'm gonna give it back to you, my brother.
Okay. All right, so let's go back. Let's go back. And I'm gonna kind of cross-examine what he cross-examined just for a moment.
Okay.
All right, so now what are we talking about? We're talking about, did the Quran come before the Bible?
Yes.
Is the subject.
Yes, sir. Sure, take your time.
I got a question, Bob.
Yes, while you're looking for that.
Oh, go ahead, guys. Peace, family. This is R from Ready for R, collaborating with Sun on TV. And I hear you sort of imposing this carbon dating on Ali, but I've watched videos with different sects of Hebrews, and I don't think they actually they don't believe in carbon dating. Am I correct?
Yes.
Some of them don't.
Well, when he says some of them, that's not the majority.
Right.
The majority look at it as being the white man's system. They don't do it.
Okay, so you being a Hebrew,
Yes.
What makes you? Why do you think that the carbon dating is actually something of validity?
All right. So the question that brother Ready for R or Hennis brought up was that if the extremist Hebrew sects, because it's not all the Hebrew sects, and this is not a now listen, this is not a knock to my brothers. I'm just saying some of them are just military based and they're not dealing with a lot of the sciences because their objective is to fix the people, right? The social ills of the people. But when you deal with the Hebrews that deal with academia, because this is a standard that academia utilizes argon dating, which is using potassium, and then you have carbon dating, which is using carbon. And my brother mentioned it earlier, carbon dating. You mentioned that earlier, right? These are sciences that academia utilizes in order to determine certain mainstream. That's why I'm bringing it out, because I'm dealing with it in the academia realm, because I'm also challenging standard academia because the white Jews have infiltrated the indigenous people of the land and have superimposed their own ideologies and doctrines on top of them. All right. So in regards to carbon dating, I use it because it is something that's been accepted in the scientific realm as well as the academia realm, and it's also utilized for dating manuscripts, whether it's papyrus, vellum, or different types of parchments, which is very important as well, because then there's also these same datings, except for the one that is the top copy, which is in Istanbul in Turkey, that has not been carbon dated. So we don't know the date on that, but looking at it from a paleographical perspective, we see that it's written in the Kufic script, and therefore we can date it was after the supposed Muhammad had lived and the Umayyad had migrated to Kufa. But I'm gonna give him back the mic.
Let me ask a question.
Sure.
Brother Divine, you
Yes,
said, now Ali might even agree with you on this one, but I don't agree with you. You said the Arabs came up with numbers, created the numbers.
No, I said the current numerical system that we have today is from the Arabs.
Where numbers come from.
Well, I'm not,
and that is in Kemet.
Well,
because the ancient Kemetics wouldn't be able to do the pyramids without numbers.
Did the Sumerians have numbers?
So we know. I'm telling you where numbers come from.
So the Sumerians didn't have numbers?
I didn't say that.
No, I'm just asking, brother.
Yes, I'm telling you that the numbers come from.
Yes.
And was created in ancient Kemet, in Egypt.
Okay, that's your perspective. There's nothing wrong with that.
So you're telling me there's no numbers before Kemet?
That's what he's saying. That's what I'm saying. You gotta look at the different.
I mean, the earliest known to man, where you can go back and find it and see it. That's
it's an ancient Kemet, you saying?
Show me where it goes beyond.
So you want a Sumerian?
I mean, that question is so. That question is so tiered. I think
because they wouldn't be able to build pyramids without.
What I'm saying is because there were civilizations before Kemet who dealt with advanced astronomy and building.
Exactly.
You know, you start going into numbers. I think what he was doing was giving a relative context for the dissemination of particular ways of counting.
There you go. That's what I'm talking about.
You know, the subject can be it can get lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think it can get lost.
Because when we look at, for example, South Africa has what's called the Adams calendar. Adams calendar was established there hundreds of thousands of years ago before Kemet was even established on the scene. And they were using a calendrical system so they can understand the harvest. And you have to be able to number these things. This is very important. You also have 8,000 Napata, if I'm not mistaken, also had a calendar system in Upper Egypt before they migrated north to Lower Egypt or Lower Kemet. So we have people using calendar systems, and calendar systems use dates, they use numbers, and they had a form of numbering, but every culture did it differently. I'm saying the standardized format that we have today as far as numbers came from the Arabs, right? Now, my brother's not going to say it's the Umayyads, because the Umayyads were superseded by the Abbasids, which he calls the pale Arabs that came on the scene and took over. Now, when they started to migrate over into North Africa and then move their way through the Moors towards Spain and educate the Europeans there, now you started to have a standardized system of numbers that was much different than you had prior to the Muslim world coming into North Africa and coming into the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal.
All right, Brother Divine, you said that
yes, sir.
In your opening statement, you said that your roots is in Africa. Do you teach this to your Hebrew brothers that be with you, brother?
Yeah.
And what do you mean by that? I want you to clarify that when you say your roots.
Can I build on that too, brother?
Yes. Hold on. Okay.
You're giving Ali mad time to get notes out.
No, I'm listening. No,
I got you. I'm just joking with him. Yeah, I'm just joking.
Right. Because I find it interesting. It seems like I find it interesting that Brother Divine, from my perspective, please let me know if I'm correct
yes, sir.
or not. You seem to be from the Afrocentric school of thought, while also adopting or embodying the Hebrew school of thought.
Yes.
So there seems to be a conflict of interest. And also in regards to this, I want you to speak to that in regards to Ali. I know he's from the Aboriginal Republic of North America.
Yes.
And from my understanding, they teach that we're just not from Africa. We're actually from all over the world, and especially
and that's true.
And I'm not disputing that.
Right. So how is that? If you're not disputing that, how can you be an Afrocentric, and also how can you be a Hebrew at the same time? Because they don't teach that.
Okay. Good question. Now, that's a great question, and you would have to look at history of the Hebrew Israelites in America. You didn't get a lot of anti-African doctrine until after 1970. Before 1970, you had a different story, because when we look at Josiah Ford, Wentworth Matthews, they were working with the UNIA, which is Marcus Garvey. These were pro-African Hebrews. Listen to what I'm saying. This doctrine didn't start coming about until Abbot Vivens, and we had the Commandment Keepers break off, and you had the original 7. You had King Yaakov, you had Ariah, you had Masha, and then the other 4 that joined them. They started to have a anti-African doctrine, and the premise for this was because when they examined the history of the Hebrew communities in Africa, they were trying to make a distinction between the Hebrew communities and also the ones that were putting them into captivity. So what they're saying is, how can the Africans be our people if they're selling us into slavery to the Europeans? So they started to make a distinction between the Hamites and the Semites that were in Africa. The Hamites had the indigenous traditional African religions. The Semites had also had an indigenous system before it was invaded with religion by the white Jews, by the Christians, which is very, very important. So when a person asks that question, it's a very valid question. You have to look at history. Now, there's a lot of schools of thought in the Hebrew Israelite community that still are pro-African. You could just go on YouTube or you could just go on Facebook and see that. But then you also have those that come from the One West camps that actually are anti-Hamitic, because they said the Hamites had sold the Semites, or our ancestors, who they colloquially call our ancestors, into slavery. So when you say that, how can you be a Hebrew and be pro-African at the same time? That just goes to show that a person is not fully educated on the history of the Hebrews in America. You have to also look at Robeson Delaney. That's very important, because he wanted to create a Black Israel in ancient Kemet. This is very, very important. And then everybody else that came before him, you have Eves Sherry, you have all these individuals. You have to do research to understand who these individuals were, what they believed. They were never anti-African. Then you had Ben Amin. Ben Amin was also a sect that brought a whole bunch of Black people over into Africa and then eventually into Israel, where a good portion of them is in Damonim right now. So all of them are not anti-African. And when you say African, I'm talking about the tectonic plate that's known as Africa. When you look at the shifting of the tectonic plates, and you look at the tectonic plate, the Levant region going towards the north side of the Jordan River Rift Valley, it's considered part of the same tectonic plate as what we colloquially call Africa. So those people can be considered, geologically speaking, Africans. Okay, so when I say that, you have to ask me, what do you mean specifically when you mention that? Because there are different tribes of people, whether they're Hamitic, Semitic, or even within Hamitic tribes, you have different tribes of people. Even in Semitic tribes, you have different Semitic tribes of people. We're talking about one tribe on another, and what they're saying is that the customs and traditions of the Africans that we see, the Bushmen, and stuff like that is much different than what we have here in America. And this is the distinction between the Semitic people and the Hamitic people.
All right, let me get that. Hey, we got a call up there, called in. Brother Polite, what's up, man? Who's your question for?
All right, cool. Got a question for both sides. You know, I just want to say first and foremost, they both doing a real good job educating the people and giving thoughts.
Yo, your phone not clear, brother. Your phone not clear.
All right, hold on. I'm gonna call you on the other phone.
All right. All right, this is powerful. The brothers definitely tuning in. Do you want to deal with some of that before we get him in? Get him back in?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I want to cover a few points that he made that was kind of off. All right, and we can go back to, first of all, when he critiqued the slide.
All right, go ahead.
And I'm going to paraphrase some of the things that he said based on the notes that I took.
Hold on. Before you get into that, let's get polite questions real quick. Because you're going to go in. You're going to go in. Give me that.
Yeah, man.
All right, sound way better, brother. Sound way better. Let's go.
Yes, I just want to say first and foremost, I commend Brother Divine and Brother Ali Muhammad